Hello YouTube, Jerry Kirkpatrick here, and in the middle of November we had the annual metal meet down in Santa Cruz, and once again it was a great get-together hosted by John Forbes. There were 6 presenters at the event, and we had quite a wide variety of subjects that were introduced at the event. I was the first presenter on Saturday morning, showing shearing and cutting. Showed the bead roller shears that I just recently resharpened so they were usable, and the use of tin snips and other ways of cutting with a nibbler and Beverly type shear. The next presenter was Kevin Cavney from up in Washington, and he did an excellent display of oxyacetylene welding steel. And rounding out the morning demonstrators was John Forbes, and he did about an hour on the Pullmax machine. When his demonstration was over, we had lunch, and then everybody gathered back in the shop and gathered around each of the presenters and for asking questions and some hands-on demonstrations. So we would do a small project and then allow the attendees to participate in that piece, whatever they were making. On Sunday morning, the first demonstrator was Don Hausman, who was making a pedal car for a couple of his grandchildren, and he was making this pedal car out of 1953 Ford pickup rear fenders that he had welded together. Really looked like a neat little piece. What his demonstration was on installing TIG welding in a patch panel. Next was Ron Covell, who did an excellent demonstration of hammer forming. He showed how the dies, the forms were made, and did some actual forming both in air, and then he made another pattern out of Bondo right there on the spot, and then did the forming, and we got to see how that whole process was accomplished. And the last presenter was Kevin West, who did a demonstration of riveting, aircraft type riveting, not just the pop rivets, and showed us how to purchase the right terminology for purchasing rivets and several of the tools that are used for setting rivets. And then once again, right after lunch, everybody gathered either outside to do a lot of different hands-on work. If they brought their own project, they were free to do so, and then get some excellent information from either the other guys in the crowd or the presenter if they have a specific project that they were working on. And for those of you who may be inclined to to click away from just random demonstrations. You must be aware that the way I attempted to edit this video was for context, not necessarily the video, but if you listen to each of the demonstrators, you may pick up some new information. So listen to the demonstrators, and you could almost watch it with your eyes closed and pick up quite a bit of information. Although I don't recommend watching it with your eyes closed, because in between the presenters, there's some pretty neat little pictures. So the first demonstrator is myself, as I stated earlier, and I'm sorry about the focus. I wasn't around the camera to keep track of that, and for some reason or another, the camera focused in on Aaron, who was sitting right in front of the camera. So don't click away. The rest of the video is fine.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Metal Meet. Those who've been here before. I think I see some new faces, which is a good thing. So Jerry Kirkpatrick is our first presenter. Jerry is a very accomplished blacksmith, machinist, sheet metal worker, racer. He's a man of many talents. So he's going to give a demonstration on cutting and shearing.
Thank you. And only a small percentage of that was bullshit. But thank you anyway. Jerry. Next we have a nibbler thing. How many have seen these nibblers? Hand nibblers? Oh, not very many. You can see the little sharp cutter edge up here on top, and I have written on here 7/16. So I had to grind off just the top edge of the blade holder to get it through a 7/16. I wanted this hole, the starting hole, to be as small as possible, because I didn't know what size I was going to want to cut around. For almost any inside hole or any side work that you're going to do, if you need a notch, you can use this. You can stick this through, look from the top here, and you can put that edge right on this line that I've got scribed in here. See what that's done? It takes a piece out the width of the cutter. And what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to pass this around, and everybody can take a cut or two out of it. Let's see what this hole looks like when it gets back.
It's all pros here.
Okay, folks, well, let's get started with our next demonstration. This is Kent Caveney, who's demonstrated here a few times, and Kent is a retired engineer, but he's an avid student of all things in life, and in particular things relating to metal, and in real particular in relation to welding. So he's given some great demos in gas welding aluminum and past metal meets here, but this time he's working with steel. So Kent, take it away.
Okay, well Ron asked me to do steel this year, and I said, but I haven't welded steel since 1998. So it's the best I could do. These are some panels. We'll start one at this end and we'll start one at this end. If you've never seen a weld before, there are some examples here and they're self-explanatory. Essentially, there's, at the top and the bottom is a completely finished weld. In between is one with filler, one without filler, and this is a tack. So you don't know what those are.
Well, I've seen a lot of wells, but none that look like this.
Oh, yeah. Be sure and look at the back side as well as the front side, because they look better on the back than they do on the front.
I'll show you one tomorrow.
So, I'm going to actually the hole in the nozzle should be about the same size as the material you're welding. So this is 20 gauge, which is 0359 or some silly numbers like that. And this tip is a little bit larger hole than that, or a little smaller hole than that, but it's close. The flame should be about 3 times the thickness of the material. And the filler rod should be about the same size as the material. So I've got a bunch of filler rod here that's 035. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We're just going to get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tack the very corner of these two pieces together. If I can get my hands to stop shaking. Well, let's look at it. Just going to do this. Now, I'm using what's called the unfilled tacking method, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm just going to melt this edge together. And there it is. And now I can swing this up. And one of the reasons I wear glasses is because my left eye doesn't see anything. And that means I don't really have a good idea of whether the edges are right lined up, but they need to be. So I do that by braille, and I just use the edge of the nozzle to tell me, yeah, they're in the same plane. Then I come in and I hold the flame. I want just a little tiny bit of carburizing, just a little feather of carburizing, man, that's too big. I hold the tip of the flame about 1/8 of an inch above the steel. And I watch to see it glow. And then it melts and it runs together and I've got a tack. And I do this again. I'm going to put these pretty close right here. Now I've made a hole. We'll come back to that later. But one of the things you sometimes want to do, if this was something where I was going to try and get two pieces together to start welding them and make the first couple tacks, and then I had to sort of, you know, move all the parts around a little bit, stress things. I want to make the tacks more than just a dot. I want to make them 2 or 3 dots long, and then they're stronger and I can abuse them a little more. My goodness, what are we going to do about
Is it always best to go from one end to the other as opposed to in to out or out to in?
You could start in the middle and go both ways, or you can start at one end and go, but you can't hop around, because if you hop around, the metal might be longer on one side than it is on the other side. Say I put a tack here and a tack here, and this stayed nice and flat, but this one warped up, and I nailed them together far apart like that, then I'd play hell trying to get them together in the middle. Okay, so I made this pretty well here. Now we're going to just tie this very last corner together, just a little bit like that. Let me turn this up. And, well, that's all there is to it, folks. No.
Easy peasy.
Since the beginning, this event wouldn't happen without him, and today he's giving us a demonstration of the Pullmax machine and associated tooling. Take it away, John.
Well, thanks for coming, everyone. Hope you're having a good time. Tacos are great. So I'm going to just talk about this machine. It's called the Universal Sheet Metal Machine. And Pullmax developed a machine. Americans started making machines similar to it. Trump makes one, and there's several other companies that make it. It's basically a reciprocating machine. This tool head here reciprocates up and down against the bottom tool holder, which is called an anvil. And it's amazing the amount of capacity this machine has to produce items in the sheet metal. I'm going to just briefly go over some of them, and then I'll try and specifically talk about them more. And then in the afternoon, I'm going to set some tooling up and we'll just run a whole bunch of different things. So right now I'm just going to give you a basic idea of how this thing operates. This holder comes out in here, and there's two types of holders. There's an inline tool holder, and there's an offset tool holder. The offset tool holder does shearing, and the inline tool holder does incredible amount of potential activities. So this is held into place here. It can be centered up either way with this nut here, and it's locked in place this way, and these cullets jam down and hold your tools. So starting off with shrinking dies. These dies are called thumbnail shrinkers. They do this is shrunk on a thumbnail shrinker. What it does is, for people that work with metal that hand shrink, is you put a tuck in the metal and then you hammer the tuck down. I mean, if you work with metal, you know how to hand shrink something with a hammer. This actually makes a tuck in the metal and hammers the tuck down. And it does some amazing shrinking. It shrinks like crazy, really. So when you use a thumbnail shrinker, you can clean it up with a doming die. Because the thumbnail shrinker does put some tooling marks into the metal, and you're fighting that all the time.
Can you plenish with that then?
Yeah, you can plenish with the doming die, or you can plenish with the E-wheel too. Or plenishing. I've got an air plenisher out there too. I like plenishing with this. It cleans it up pretty well, but the thumbnail shrinkers do put a lot of tooling into it. I have special dies for aluminum, and it's not quite as bad as the steel dies, but still, it's just. And then you get, the more you're familiar with the way the machine works, the less of the tooling marks you put in it. You can kind of feel the motion of the tooling, the way the tool works.
Our first presenter for the day is Don Hausman, who you saw yesterday, but he's going to give kind of a special demonstration today. Welding and fitting long seams and then getting into the finish work to make the welded seam as nice as it can be. So Don, take it away.
All right. First off, I apologize for the hat, but it's really, really cool, and you guys should get one.
With the choke collar?
What I'm going to do is basically, this is a project that I sort of started for this demonstration. I don't know whether I'm really fortunate or what, but I have two grandkids that turned out just like my daughter, and Karma is so cool. I just love it because they're putting her through the paces. But this is basically, it was, they put these fenders, Ford pickup fenders together for amusement park rides back in the 50s. A friend of mine, Ed Morgan, did it. And they used a lot of Ford pickup fenders, and I scrounged up a couple and I welded them together. And I thought, wow, that's really cool looking. And I think it'll make a good demo. Well, the one thing that I mentioned a little bit yesterday was the heat affected zone. And you can see here where Kent was welding, we're out almost 4 inches with the heat affected zone, which that causes that much distortion, shrinkage, whatever. The heat affected zone here, I think at the most we're about 1 inch, and it kind of makes it easier to control the warpage and distortion. And I'm not going to lie, I was pretty proud of this weld. One of the better ones I've done, and this is 18 gauge as opposed to 20 gauge, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah, well, actually,
I did here, I'm within that 3/16, 1/8 inch quarter max that Mel talked about yesterday as far as trimming. And so what I'll do is get the light right so I can see. And you should be able to cut I think probably within 10/1000ths of an inch with these. And I've done cut circles out at home and measured them, and you can get them pretty close. And the burrs that Mel talked about yesterday are from not pushing the snips all the way in when you start your next cut. Let's see if I can get a tag here, so everybody's going to have to kind of...
You don't use those clamps, Don?
No, they leave a gap. And that's all it takes right there. So what we'll do is we'll kind of just work our way, get a couple of them to hold the piece in there so it doesn't end up on the floor. So I'm just going to weld this really quick. And that's way longer than I would normally weld. Flattest hammerhead I have here. I have a flat spot here that I have done this and hit it from the inside out to kind of bring it out, because this is it's not bad, but it could use a little bit to bring it out. But I brought a hammer with me.
Okay, folks, let's get started. I'm going to give a demonstration on the hammer forming process. How many people here are familiar with the process and may have done some of it? So about half of you are familiar with the process. For those who have no idea what I'm talking about, there are two types of hammer forms. Well, let me start at the beginning. The hammer forming process, as I use the term, is making a form out of some material. It could be wood, plastic, concrete, any material. And the short story is you lay metal over the form you've created and hammer the metal until it takes on the shape of the form underneath it. And there's two classes of hammer forms. One I call male and one I call female. So perhaps the most common situation is where you have a piece of material. Let's say your goal is to take a metal piece and to form flanges or shapes on the edges. So you would take a solid piece of material that would be your form, and whatever edge detail you want your metal part to have, you put that edge detail on the form. So in this case, we could make square cornered flanges by hammering metal over the square corners on the form. Or if we wanted round corners, we would round the corners off. And then as you hammer the metal against the rounded edges, the metal would take on that rounded form. So that's what I call a male hammer form, where the center stays flat and all the action is at the edge. What we're doing today is the other kind of hammer form, which I call a female hammer form. So this form actually is just a cavity. And what I'm going to do is to put a flat piece of metal over the cavity, clamp everything in place to keep the edges straight, and then work the metal down with a hammer or a mallet. And this is a very fluid process. That means if I just hit it a few times, I'll get a very shallow shape. But the more I continue to hammer it, it will be forced deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole, and I stop when it looks right, or when I have the depth I want. And here's the part that Bob hammered for me yesterday, using a very, very similar form. And this is 050 aluminum. It's 3003 alloy, so one of the softest alloys, and Bob annealed it before he started. So the part I'm making is actually quite similar to this. Bob did this with a mallet, and you spent a couple of hours getting this depth, as I recall. And it came out great. And the bumps that are in here can be taken out. They could be smoothed by hammer and dolly work, or with the English wheel, or with the planishing hammer. A lot of different ways to get the bumps out. But in that time span, he got a very deep part, and it was shaped very uniformly. So I'm going to do one demonstration freehand. I'm just shaping by eye. When I decide it's as deep as I want, I'll stop. But after I've completed the first demo, I'm going to create a solid bottomed hammer form that limits exactly how deep the metal can go. And with a solid bottom hammer form, you can make the same part over and over and over and over and over with a good degree of accuracy.
So production work kind of.
Yeah, if you need to make more than one part and it's important that they all be identical, the solid bottom hammer form is a good way to go. But it's a little bit... So that's probably about as far as I'll go with that. And I will pass this around so you can have an up-close and personal look at it. Use Bondo to cast a solid body in this hammer form. I talked about the difficulty of carving a cavity accurately from solid material. So rather than doing that, we're going to use an already formed part as a mold to cast Bondo against. So I need to put a mold release agent on this. We're using for a handful of parts made out of aluminum, Bondo works just fine. We could probably make 20 parts with a Bondo hammer form, and even if it cracked after 20 parts, you could grind out the cracks, fill in with more mud, sand the sheet into it, and keep right on going. So Bondo is pretty good stuff. I'm going to mix up a really hot batch because we want this to kick fast. Right up.
It's like you've done this before.
So there's our cavity. Now, like I say, it's easy to do if you cast it against an existing part. So difficult to do if you're carving it from a solid. And there is one little void in here. You know, in real life, we would mix up a tiny bit of Bondo and fill that in, but we don't have time for that. So let's put this to the test and see how quickly and how well we can form a new part into the solid bottom hammer form setting. So this one doesn't
use them over and over and over again.
Yeah. Okay, so we're all clamped up and ready to go. Let me do this in a hurry. Before that guy who keeps track of time tells me I've got to stop. Okay, we're done. So that's what it looks like in the form.
3 minutes.
Right.
So here's the part we just formed, and here's the master we used to cast the cavity from.
That's great.
And you know, this one that I just formed.
Can you get that piece and your form?
Sure.
And hold them both up, look at the camera, and try to smile.
Act like you want your,
Yeah, there you go. We got that one. All right.
Did you get what you need? Okay, folks, so Kevin West is our next presenter. He's been here as a presenter for several years in a row now. He always does an exceptional job of talking about riveting, and he may get into hole placement and layout techniques as well.
Yep,
Take it
great.
away.
Thank you. So my
Oh, one more thing. It's important that you know that Kevin is the one who printed these shirts, and he has them for sale. They're up there on that table. So if you'd like to take a souvenir home, Kevin is the person to talk to
Thank you.
about that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So rivets and the military terminology. So if I told you right now I want an AN 470 A3-3-12, anybody here know what that means? There might be one person. I've had them in here before. But you probably don't. So it's not like saying I want a 1032 machine screw. You've got to understand the terminology. So first of all, let's start with there's a couple different types, basic types of heads. But we're always talking about grip length. And grip length is measured on the bottom on a domed head. So you see this line across here. Or if you're countersinking, the grip length includes that top material. So this is the actual length depending on the type of head. There's lots of different types of heads and numbers for those, but a 470 is this, it's called a universal head. So it's not a perfect round head. You can see there's a little flat on the top. So you could drive this with a flat tool instead of with a rounded tool, but I usually use the rounded tool. And then you would drive this, the 426 is the countersunk. And so you would drive that with a flat tool. So rivets, and you want to use smaller rivets. We were playing with this yesterday with these -5s that are pretty thick and older, and it was pretty hard to squeeze by hand just to get this to squeeze enough. But if you're using fresh rivets and soft rivets, this tool does a really pretty good job. The next level up, or you'll actually use this a lot. It looks like an air hammer. This one is actually made by a company called Cleco. And brand new, these are pretty steep. These are, you know, a couple of grand, $3 grand, just like we're talking about for air tools. But you can get them used on eBay pretty inexpensively. This happens to be, there's different sizes, and it's sized by the barrel. So this is a 3, and that's a 4. So it's the length of the barrel. So as the barrel gets longer, it hits harder, but it hits slower. Okay, so there's a trade-off. So if the barrel's short, it hits lightly, but it hits faster. Long barrel hits harder, but hits slower. I mean, it just more times. One of about 20 shapes there are for bucking bars, and this is just the one that looked like it worked the most for what I do. So you hold the bucking bar on the back, and you put your device here, you put your hammer here, and as you hit, what you don't see is this is going to flex. And I don't care how big and bad this is, under this torque, it's going to flex a little bit. What it does is forces the hammer to bounce. So it's actually the hammer coming back as you're trying to hold it. It's actually the hammer coming back that forms the shop head on the back side of the rivet. So, and it's kind of cool because when you're up here actually looking, you can actually see it happening, and it's really fun to watch. So let's go ahead and, gonna be a little noisy. So I'm gonna be setting it for 25 as we go, and I just look at it and there we go. Let's give it a go. And there we go. So that's the next step up in complexity. And then lastly, we get to the really Mahama Jamba pneumatic air tools. And I like this tool. I really like this tool. This is one of the tools I call a magic tool. What I mean by a magic tool is I would drill holes and cut rivets and set things up just to watch this do what it does. Okay, I have done that. I've gone up to the shop just for a therapy session, drilled some holes, and driven some rivets with this because it's so fun to watch. Okay, there's only 2 magic tools.
So there you have a weekend in Santa Cruz. Happens every year, right around Halloween. It was great for both the presenters and the audience. I think everybody came away with some good information. And for those of you that were in attendance, if you don't think that some of your friends that either were or were not able to attend, share this video with them. I'm sure they will appreciate seeing it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and ring the bell. See you later.